And loyal listeners listening at home, welcome to another edition of the Ludic Loungecast. We're going to start off our Battleground talk, which is book 2 of the 2 novels that recently came out by Jim Butcher regarding the Dresden Files, with this prelude quote. Not one quip about hentai, Dresden, which is Laura Wraith after fighting the Kraken that they introduce this novel with.
Yeah, it's boy, he opens up this one with all of the killer no filler that we were wishing Peace Talks had, huh?
Absolutely, John. And this one literally, now if you're just now happen to stumble upon this episode, we recommend you listen to last week's episode, and we recommend that you listen to all of our episodes because they're gold.
Also, I am John. He is Antonicus Gluteus Maximus IV, the booty from another land down under.
Now, John, before we actually get into it, there was a mulligan that you wanted to announce and call back because we made a minor boo-boo.
Yeah, well, you didn't. You're glorious. I made the boo-boo. In conversation, we brought up the mother of Harry Dresden's child, Maggie. Susan, I mistakenly called her Susan Delgado. Her real name is Susan Rodriguez. I was, for whatever reason, thinking of the romantic interest in one of the Dark Tower novels.
Well, at least you weren't being racist, John. That's the important part.
No. Way to make it awkward.
Absolutely. That's what we do here.
That's what we do. We make it weird. Let's go.
So, loyal listeners listening home, this one, Battleground, I think, is my favorite of the 2. This is where I got a lot of the feels. This is where it really literally took me into a roller coaster of emotions, if you will. John, would you say you'd agree with that?
I'd agree. I mean, and we talked about it last week, Anthony. Peace Talks is very much a prelude setup. It's not without its action sequences or, dramatic moments as we've talked about before. But the meat of the conflict that is brought up in Peace Talks is all here in Battleground. Absolutely. This is where the shit hits the fan. This is where Aithnu takes, her magical forces and literally just obliterates so many parts of Chicago.
Absolutely. And folks, spoiler talk, we're going to be probably mentioning things that happen in this novel. So if you haven't read this novel, all 5 of you, 4 of them being us, we recommend that you finish reading, obviously, and then you can come back at this point, and I'm going to leave a pause at point. Okay.
Spoilers!
We're back. Yes, we're back, and we're going full into spoilers today.
Can you lift like my spoilers and just use it whenever we need? It's like spoilers.
That's a good idea. I'm going to leave it there. I left a nice little pause so I can edit it if need be.
So, Anthony, we open with Battle Talks right at the end where we left Harry.
Did you do that on purpose?
What?
You called it Battle Talks.
Battle Talks.
Because
like Battle Toads.
Like Peace Talks and Battleground combined. I actually very much enjoyed that.
Battle Talks. It's like Battle Toads, but with more wizards.
We're going to have that kind of a night, it seems like.
Oh, geez. Mondays. Monday.
Oh, gosh.
Don't move me from YouTube. So, to correct myself, at the end of Peace Talks, Anthony, we left our heroes, Harry, his paramour and partner, Karen, Murph, his kind of relative, but not Laura Wraith, sister to, or half-sister to Harry's half-brother, Thomas, who we left on the magical prison Demon Reach, and your favorite Valkyrie, leaving Demon Reach about to literally descend into magical war hell.
Yeah, and it again, I made the quip about hentai, and essentially right off the bat, as soon as you say go, they're attacked on the water beetle, which is their aptly named ship that they have going back to Chicago, by a Kraken.
A full-fledged Kraken, and it becomes a giant fight between the Kraken and Lara and Valkyrie. The only thing that saves the day is Molly being, a good Padawan and evil magic witch, I guess.
Well, I mean, she definitely throws all of her evil witch magic here.
And sharks.
Yeah, yeah. A group of bull sharks to kill and start to eat away at the Kraken.
Enough to let it get killed with a grenade.
Yes, the holy hand grenade of Antioch.
I mean, I'm surprised he didn't make that, joke.
That's fair. That would be kind of a stretch, I think, though. So
yeah,
after essentially loyal listeners and John, after they dock the water beetle, after fighting this enormous Kraken and just getting out by the skin of their teeth, essentially Dresden and Murphy, they head to McAnally's pub, which is the wizarding hub of pubs. See, a little play on words I did for you loyal listeners listening at home.
Yeah, and Mac McAnally to his friends, I think this is one of the first instances where we get an idea that Mac is not exactly who, not normal. He's not a human being. There's something more to Mac.
See, that's the thing. And again, I'm going to probably ring this same bell I rang on our last episode. I wish I would have read all the novels before jumping into these two, because I felt like in one of the previous novels, there was a little bit of insight into Mac's history, or at least a brief little insight that he's like an actual top dog in the in the Fey world, or in the supernatural world, if you will.
I mean, personally, part of me is thinking that maybe he's God.
I mean, that would be some shit.
Maybe God is an Irishman. I don't know. But I mean, McAnally's is essentially just a neutral ground for the magical world. And Harry is using it to keep Murphy safe, because she is not physically the most spry based off of the injuries from previous novels, and he needs a hub that will be helping people. So the werewolves, his werewolf friends from many novels ago, are there, and they're there to help. And they even put the placard from Jesus's cross on like some part of the bar, I think the doorway to the bar, to protect everybody and make it absolutely ironclad from the Fulmore.
And essentially, John, this is where, and I want to mention to the loyal listeners at home, so McAnally's pub throughout this series has kind of always been like the neutral zone, right? Yeah. If you want to bring into Star Trek terms, you've had the Federation on one side, you have the Romulan Empire on the other side, and you've always had what was called the neutral zone, which is, a space in which the two empires collide, that it's essentially this peaceful run of space. And McAnally's has always been that. It's been Switzerland, if you will. It's been the natural where anyone can come in. They will be, they will be as safe as they can be, and they don't have to worry about getting attacked for the most part, because shit goes down in that pub all the time from novel to novel. But for the most part,
yeah. But Mac's pub has been the place where it is absolutely 100% guaranteed no nonsense is going to happen there, because that's the rule and everybody follows it.
Yeah.
From Mac's pub, and after convincing Murph to stay put, help people, Harry goes off to Castle Marconi. And I don't think we talked about Gentleman Johnny all too much, Anthony, last time, did we?
No, we just mentioned he became Baron Marconi, and essentially this mortal has all of this grandstanding that the Fae and all of the powers that will be in that realm give to him, this respect and reputation, because for the most part he's actually earned it, because he's just a badass dude.
Yeah, for a little bit more context, John Marconi is, I think he started, if my memory serves me correctly, and again, we should have gone back and done some digging back on the previous books, but Marconi is, I guess, for lack of a better description, a stereotypical gangster, and then he gets roped into the magical world and sees a way that he can profit out of it. So he continually just increases his involvement and his status, and has gotten to the point by peace talks, and by the time Harry becomes the Winter Knight, like 2 books prior to peace talks, Marconi has positioned himself as an influential muckety muck in the magical world, and he is a big gun. So he used his headquarters, which is built on top of the remains of Harry's old house, which got blowed the fuck up in changes. And Harry hasn't forgotten that. But so that's another thing that Marconi has against Harry. He's got his house. He also just doesn't like Harry because Harry is a loose cannon cop who will do what it takes to save the day.
Yeah, exactly.
Usually at Marconi's expense in some way.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much. And John, once we start to get a showdown, because essentially Dresden runs out of the pub and he's headed to Castle Morcone, but he has a showdown with Bradley and Rudolph.
Yeah, and we mentioned these. Well, Bradley's fine; he's just doing his job. Rudolph's the dickhead. But these two detectives had encountered Murph and Harry before, and are trying to get them looped in or on the hook for a crime that was committed during the previous novel to Peace Talks. And they're just reacting in response to this giant electromagnetic pulse that Aithnu created with her evil weapon, and that nuked all of, I think nuke's the right word, nuked all of the electronics in Chicago. So Chicago is just dead. Everything electronic is dead.
Like just a massive EMP pulse, essentially.
Yeah. So Rudolph does not take any of this shit well. And you mentioned that last time, Anthony. He's just, how can you see all of these things and not believe it? But then again, I mean, I think in part I don't want to compare it to the current world situation, but I think there's a comparison to be made because, well, let's be honest. Sometimes the thing is right in front of you and people will just constantly deny it until they're blue in the face.
Yeah. And if you think about it, John, it's not so uncommon from what natural people do. I mean, like, let's look at, people passing by homeless people every single day, right? They choose to believe that person's not there. So while it is hard to believe that, after seeing like a werewolf, essentially a loup-garou, tear up an entire police station, it's hard to believe that. But on the other hand, if you just have so much denial from that and just build upon that denial, yeah, I can kind of see it from happening. But it still doesn't excuse anything, mind you.
Yeah, and that eventually this encounter resolves, partly due to a soul gaze between Bradley and Dresden, which a soul gaze is it's in the name. You look into each other's souls, and it's a thing that is exclusively done by wizards to other people by making eye contact. And Harry tends to avoid that, but sometimes it happens, and you have to deal with the consequences. And that's how this situation.
Yeah, you have this situation. And did a soul gaze with the fucking Kraken too earlier.
Yeah, that was some shit.
Yeah. So essentially, way I understand it is, in my head, how I always understand it, it's essentially like bringing back Star Trek is when Spock does the Vulcan mind meld. It's kind of a similar thing where you both see each other's past, you both see each other's emotions, you both feel each other's souls, if you will, and sometimes it ends up well, sometimes it's not so well. So after initiating the soul gaze, Rudolph draws his gun. He's about ready to blow away Dresden because he thinks he did something to Bradley. Now, Bradley ends up recovering, and he tells Rudolph to stand down, that Rudolph has piss poor, gun control, which, we're going to put a pin on that.
Boy, are we.
Yeah, so we're going to put a pin in that for a little bit later, obviously. But if you already read the novel, you're already going to know what we're hinting towards.
Yeah, and after Harry leaves these two clowns, well, one clown and a clown and a half, he comes across Castle Marconi, and he's able to get in after a brief encounter with some of Odin's forces, I guess. Odin's called Vadarung. I believe that's another title for Odin, but it's a comedy moment. When we're not going to spend too much time with it, but there's an encounter that Harry has with Carlos Ramirez, and Anthony, we mentioned last time, Harry was on very tense terms with his friends in the Wardens and with the White Council. And a lot of it stems from their belief that Harry is turning into something that they can no longer trust and or control.
Right.
So, I mean, I think I get a lot of what Harry does here. Like he doesn't have the time to really focus in on, dealing with his interpersonal relationships, but
Right.
it's just a carry on of something that you and I harped on last time. It's just like, can't these adults have a normal fucking conversation?
Literally, John, a 3-minute conversation saying, "Hey, Carlos, look, I'm me. I don't care what you think. I'm me. I have this going on. I have to balance that. I have to balance this. And yeah, by the way, a Titan is going to come and try to destroy my city. So look, I'm a little stressed out right now, man, but I have the weapon to bring this Titan, to bend this Titan to my will. I just need you to trust me, man." But again, if he would have initiated this conversation in the previous book and they would have had it out, then follow up with this conversation, I could have seen it going a hell of a lot better for Dresden and his relationship with Carlos Ramirez, John.
Yeah, and I'd like to bring that up again, at least the relationship with the Wardens after some things that we talk about in this book, because I don't know if there's a way back to a positive place, at least for, Carlos and Harry.
I don't think so, especially with all the shit they went down, or that's going to go down, and that went down already.
And we're taking a little bit more linear path here because there's a lot of events in this battle, whereas Peace Talks is a little bit more. We can play a little bit looser and just talk about character relationships and themes. But here, if we skip over events, we're losing something major.
Yeah.
So we learn that they start talking tactics. That's what we're learning. We're learning the battle plan, and Harry's plan involves Demon Reach, of course, because it's a magical prison. So he needs to do a binding. He needs to get close to Eifnu to do a binding to imprison her within Demon Reach as well. Right. But the situation is that she is wearing bronze armor that is created for a Titan. So there is no physical way with that armor intact and with her defenses intact that Harry can do the binding. She needs to be significantly weakened, and that leads to Ebenezer and Mab and Harry all going to talk tactics with the rest of the Unseelia coordinations, and they're just getting their asses handed to them. Let's just call it that. It's a siege at Marconi's castle, and they're just getting destroyed by the Fulmore scouts.
Right. And those scouts, man, they're from the what did he describe them? It was like a mixture of an octopus and oh god, I can't remember the damn name of it.
Wasn't it a gorillapus?
Gorillapus, yeah, it was something like that. It was like a mixture of a gorilla and an octopus.
Yeah, something like that. Or congorillas? No, wait.
That was something.
Congtopus? Pustakong? Octokong.
Octokong, yeah, that sounds about right. It was something along those lines, right? And these things are like, there's so many numbers that it's completely fucking up, like the casters trying to do protective spells and everything. So, John, This is where we get a little bit of help from our friends.
Yeah, little tiny friends, the recurring friends, and it's kind of nice to see them play such a significant role.
So we get a little bit of a kind of comedic scene when Toot Toot is summoned by Dresden, and essentially Dresden convinces him with pizza, and through his. Go ahead, John.
Well, Anthony, you kind of put the cart before the horse there. We got to explain who Toot Toot is to the people.
If they're listening to this, they should probably at least know that. Hell, I knew that, and I haven't read any of the books for a long while.
Toot Toot is a friend of Harry's who he's a little tiny Tinkerbell-esque fairy who Harry bribes with pizza, and he has essentially bribed Toot Toot's people enough and involved himself in their the Wee Folk. They're called the Wee Folk,
Yeah.
He's involved himself in their politics so much that he is essentially, for lack of a better descriptor, he's practically a god to them.
Yeah, he's their
And
king, essentially. Yeah.
He's the king, and like he bribes all of the wee folk, tens of thousands with them, with the threat that this might be the end of pizza.
Yeah. And
so at the will of the Tsar Lord.
Yeah, exactly. And
They
so
fight.
the wee folk mobilize, and their whole thing is to point out, is to help against these little scouts that are flying down on the casters, and to point out where they are, so that way, the bigger folk can actually take notice and actually end them before these little Fomor scouts land on them. And essentially, John, this is a great scene. It's an awe-inspiring moment because it's not just Tutu and a couple other. This is like the entire wee folk of the entire Fey Nation, essentially. And they're like dancing in the sky, mobilizing. And everyone, mob included, just takes a moment of awe to realize that Dresden has come to the place where he can summon, again, they're tiny folk, but he can summon, it seemed like tens of thousands, if not like close to 1 million of these wee folk. So it lights up the sky, lights up everything. They put on a fun show. And again, it kind of harkens back to like an awe, but it's also the White Council looks upon it as more so of a, oh God, now he can do this. Look at him. He's not natural anymore. He's not the Harry Dresden we knew.
Which overlooks the fact that the way Harry did this was by years and years of literally earning their trust.
Yes.
So this not a thing. It's not a thing that is resulting out of him being the Winter Knight. It's resulting out of him being Harry.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's just, again, another situation where if grown-ass adults just fucking talk to each other.
Yes, 100%.
But I digress in my frustration. So Harry is told you have to stay out of the fight because he needs to be intact for the binding. If they waste him too early, he's not going to be ready, and all will be lost. But it's Harry, and it's Chicago, and Chicago's in danger. So what does Harry Dresden do when Chicago's in danger, Harry? Or Anthony, you're Harry now.
There we go. He jumps into action, John, and it's getting to the point where it's building up. At first, he hears people screaming. He's like, nope, okay, I'm okay, I'm okay. And then he just hears like a little girl give a blood-curdling scream, and that's when he's like, no, fuck this. Fuck you guys. Fuck White Council. Fuck mob. I'm going to do this my way. And jumps in and starts fighting this, I guess, what do they call them? It was essentially like
a huntsman.
Huntsman, yeah.
Yeah.
And their thing is like they always travel in packs, and when you kill one, their strength transitions to the rest of the pack.
Yeah.
So by the time they get to Harry gets to the last one, and he's not fighting alone. He has a rescue mission with
he is joined by his friend Sasquatch, who shows up in a number of short stories and some of the more recent novels. His full name is Strength of a River in His Shoulders. He is just called River Shoulders for short, but he's a friendly Sasquatch. He wears glasses. Think of him like a little bit more monosyllabic beast from the X-Men, plus a lot bigger. And he joins Harry. They go into the fight and are just saving these people and trying to get them into Castle Marconi so that they are away from the Huntsman, because it's not an easy fight against these things.
No, it starts off that way because again, what Harry doesn't realize, and what his Sasquatch buddy's trying to tell him, John, is that you need to kill them all quickly, because if not, you get to the situation where they were in, where all of their strength and all their power transfers to the sole remaining Huntsman, and it is fucking Harry up.
Yeah, it's so much of this book is Harry having to deal with just not being able to do everything he wants to do, because it's just there's just so much at stake, and there's so much relying on him that he has to be willing to delegate and has to be willing to accept, I can't do it all.
Yeah. So while saving this small band of refugees, is a feel-good moment, ultimately, he falls back with Mob and Ebenezer and Castle Marconi, and they're like, yeah, that was nice, but look, here's the plan. We're going to just keep going into a meat grinder as fast as we can to force this Titan to hit the entire group with their ultimate weapon of mass destruction. And then, Harry comes in after they weaken her and tries to bind.
Yeah.
Simple enough, right?
But not so much.
Yeah,
exactly. Because now we're dealing with evolving battles and evolving plans to the battles. So the White Council now, along with the Summer Court, assisted by the Svartalfs, who are still in a little precarious situation because of the nature of how things have been, because their king was assassinated. They are forced into a situation where they have to create a wall to block the advance and force Eichnu to blast through, like you were saying, Anthony.
Yeah.
So they're getting ready to do this, but then they hear, oh crap, there's necromancy in Graceland Cemetery.
Yeah, and they're trying to raise the dead to kind of break up the group of Harry and all of them, break up the group to where they're, weaken them and pick them off. So the White Council essentially is assigned to take on these necromancers.
Yeah, so Harry and his warden buddies, Yoshimo, Myers, Chandler, and Carlos, all go to the cemetery to fight these necromancers, and they find Black Court vampires led by Dracula, him fucking self. Because of course.
And already the warden's like, well, fuck. Because
yeah, and this one hurt because we lose two of the wardens. Yoshimo and Myers are killed by the vampires and are taken, and we presume they are going to be turned. And Chandler himself is banished to the Never Never, and the Never Never, for our listeners at home, is a magical realm that is separate from our realm. It's the spirit world, essentially, and there's no real way we know he survived or if he's ever going to come back.
Yeah.
So it's a brutal sequence because it's just all of Harry's friends just slaughtered, essentially.
Essentially, and it's just it's a heartbreaking scene, and Ramirez is just shook by it, obviously. And Harry essentially gets to Ramirez and says, look, man, we got to keep pushing forward. We will try to find their bodies later. We will try to find Chandler. But right now, we have bigger fish to fry, man. Like, we can't go chasing these Black Court vampires.
Yeah, otherwise, we're just dooming the whole world to fail. Because at the end of the day, what Eichnu is trying to do is just force the human world to encounter the spirit, the magical world on a consistent basis. And if that's the case, then it becomes an all-out war all over the world, and that's going to just cost millions. So it's the, like you said, Anthony, it's the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that's just what Carlos has to deal with. We also learn that Dracul is a Starborn, which is something that keeps coming up in regard to Harry. It's something that he is told that he is, but nobody is explaining what the hell it actually is. We know that it's the implications are that whoever is Starborn, they are able to hold great power, but we don't exactly know for what purpose people tend to groom them. So Dracul was like Harry, then went somewhere else because fucking vampire.
Right.
But to talk about to tangent off of the Starborn stuff, because honestly we don't give we're not given much. We're just teased by it, and I think it's just Butcher setting up conflict later on for somebody else that shows up later. But we'll get to that individual when we get there. That's just my thought. But Dracul just did this because he wants more vampires.
Yeah, that was literally the reason that he was like, okay, yeah, we'll do this little thing because they want to bolster up the numbers, because for those fans of the series, essentially most of the Black Court was taken out in a few books. It was changes essentially, and changes, most of them were killed out.
Yeah, along with the Red Court, I believe.
Yeah, I believe so. Again, I'm a little shaky on it because I haven't read the books, but I remember the White Council had a big strike against these vampires.
Yeah, so it's all, a lot of this stuff with Dracul is just I feel like set up for either the next novel or whatever next novel there's going to be.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's just, Harry, it'll be Harry trying to get back into the good favors of Ramirez or whatever. But that's just, this is a heart-wrenching sequence more for Harry, yes, more so for Carlos, but ultimately is just it's there to give us that seed later on. So Harry and Ramirez save the human sacrifice that was there as part of this necromancy ritual. Now Harry has to deal with the fact that people are really aware he's a wizard.
Yeah.
And he's surrounded by all these Jotnar and honored dead and Vikings, all these weird nonsense. And he's trying to just create. Now he has to deal with freaking frost giants.
Yes. And John, honestly, this scene is so fucking cool. It's so fucking cool. It's probably one of my favorites in this book.
Yeah, Harry has to fight against a single Jotun, one of these frost giants, and after trying to help other, McCoy and all these other wizards just do what they can to stop these things. One, they use a bunch of fire ants, which is rad.
Yeah. But and again, the allies, the Viking allies, upon hearing that they're going to fight these frost giants, are just enraged. They start going to the battle frenzy. It's just like they start chanting and delighting, and it's just so fucking coll.
It's like it's TGI Friday.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank God it's Frost Giant Friday.
I'll allow that one. That was a good.
It was ham-fisted. You shouldn't allow that.
Yeah,
so we get the knights back again, because the Knights of the Cross show up along with specifically Butters, his wolf pack, because he's boning two werewolves at once. I don't think I think it's all of them, but that's besides the point. And Murphy shows up, so they all save they all Brothers, the Alphas, and Murph come to save Dresden. And Bob the Magic Skull is here too, Anthony.
Yes, he is. We get our Bob appearance.
I missed Bob.
Yeah.
I got so used to him just being around and giving Harry all this sage but somewhat creepy on occasion advice. So to have him missing for so long is kind of sucked, but it's good to have him back.
Yeah. And as they're going, John, as they're going through the streets of Chicago, and there's just literally blood in the streets, and they come across some of the most fucked up things they've ever seen.
Yeah.
And it is a haunting. And it's getting to the point where Dresden is getting, I mean, not just Dresden, but like Butters is puking in the streets. Murphy's puking just because of the sheer viciousness that is going on in these streets. And essentially it gets to the point where, and this part itself is just awesome, where Harry really starts to tap into the Winter Knight's mantle, but he taps in to not deaden the feeling inside. Instead, he uses his feelings of just this sick feeling of watching these people die in his city, and he's using it to amplify the Winter Knight's mantle. So the pain he's feeling, he's using it to amplify the mantle, to call upon all the big baddies of the Fae and the Winter Court to, like, as his army, his own little personal army, essentially.
Yeah, he's creating a war banner, and that it's something that he does in opposition to something that or in not necessarily in opposition, but kind of riffing off of the idea. Mab, the Winter Queen, as a countermeasure to what Aithnu is doing with the Eye of Baelor, she creates a psychic armor shroud that dulls pain and fears of the allies, if you will call them.
Right.
And it's Harry doesn't necessarily agree with that, because it's just, he's always had the issue with the Winter Knight mantle, where it just deadens everything, and he's not 100% aware of his body, because the the mantle is just telling him, don't worry about it, and is just going off like essentially pure adrenaline or magical adrenaline. So Harry is just trying to use his own forces to just support Mab in his own way, and in a way that doesn't feel as messy as I think he thinks Mab's is, because Mab is the target. That's Eithnu's target. If Mab falls, everything comes to a close.
Yes. The game is over at that point.
The game is absolutely over. Part of this whole creating a war banner thing that Harry does is, one of the things I loved is that he puts Sonya, the Russian Knight of the Cross, as is essentially his immediate second in command, and he takes charge, and it's really fucking great. The next objective Harry has is they have to save a child care center that's in the pathway of the enemy. You know, there's probably, they don't know if there's kids there, but they can't take that risk because it's Harry. Right. You know, you if he knew Maggie was there, hell or high water would stop him. Wouldn't stop him from getting there.
Exactly.
When they get to the child care center, Anthony, who do they find? Do you remember?
Oh, they find Bradley and Rudolph defending it. I mean, if you can call Rudolph actually defending it, he was more just being an asshole. So to the point where Bradley has to knock him out just to actually get everyone to cooperate with the evacuation of this fucking child home.
Yeah, and the reason that they're there is that Bradley's daughter is there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So they have to, and while they're doing all of this, a frost giant shows up.
Yes.
And he's a bastard because apparently he survived Thor himself. And for those who are a little bit unaware of your Norse mythology, Thor really didn't like frost giants. He killed almost every single one that he came across. And if this frost giant is saying that he survived, that means he's a tough sumbitch.
Yes, exactly. And Harry knows that. Just hearing that he's bested Thor, Harry's like, fuck, of course. The one frost giant to have to... And it's not like he's going to sit there and boast about how he overcame Thor. Like, this frost giant is super direct. He's like, yeah, I bested Thor. I did all this. Let's go.
Yeah, it's just part of the culture that the Einar Jarl and the Jotun have, you know, just Viking culture where they're just like, this is my story. This is what I've survived. What you got? Well, I've got this. Well, I've got this. Okay, let's fight. Yeah. Harry fights, and boy, it's a little bit insane because you know he doesn't really do that well.
No,
until Murphy. Yeah, he gets fucked up, and then Murph comes in with the save because apparently she has a rocket launcher. Because God bless her.
Yeah, and she blows the holy fuck out of this frost giant with that rocket launcher.
Yeah, and then we get to, I think, the worst fucking moment in this fucking book.
My heart just broke.
I'm honestly not happy about it.
No, I mean it. I think it made sense for how Harry had to get towards the end of this book, but essentially, we just got to get into it, John. Rudolph awakens, and
he got socked in the face by Bradley, and because of his poor trigger discipline, Anthony, which Bradley so chastised him for, he shoots Murphy in the throat by accident.
Yeah. And Murphy tries to tell Dresden that she loves him, and it's just she dies right before even completing it, John. And
it was like at that point you don't need to. You don't need to finish it. You know what she was trying to say, and I believe they had said it before, but it was just it's another line in the tragedy of Harry Dresden, where it's just like everybody close to him seems to just die or get killed.
And Dresden
personally for me,
winter night at that moment, John.
Yeah. He comes close to killing Rudolph because he's just in a blood rage. You know, the person who's been with him the longest at this point, who he has fallen in love with, who he fully expected to get out of this, like she had gotten through every single thing before. And I feel between this and peace talks, the writing was somewhat on the wall. I think, that something was going to happen in some sense of the word, because at this point in the series, we're talking like almost a decade and a half at this point. Murphy's been through some shit, and she's physically not able to do the things that she used to do.
No.
So in my head, when it came to peace talks, it was just like, okay, she's probably, this might be a Michael Carpenter situation where she's put off to the side a little bit just because she physically cannot do this job anymore. Yeah. But personally, I'm very frustrated with this. I feel this feels like a fridging to me. This is just murdering the female lead to give the male lead motivation.
Yeah.
I think it leads to interesting stuff, but it's just like it didn't need to be. I just I'm just frustrated with it. It's not fair, and I think that's just the I guess that's the explanation you can give for this, is that it's supposed to not be fair because Harry has to learn something out of this.
Yeah, but
Anthony, give us your thoughts, because I'm too frustrated with it.
No, honestly, John, I am in the same mind as you. I literally was reading this part and out loud just said, "Oh," and like in my softest, most broken-hearted voice, just said, "Oh no!" Like it. I wish it didn't happen. I think that there could have been some clever ways to write around it, but I appreciate what happens just for later on down the road where he meets up with Mab again and they have a conversation. But in this moment, Harry, again, he just gives into the will of the Winter Mantle. He just wants to cause pain. He just wants this blood fever to go away. And he's stopped by Butters, of all people. And what stops him, John, is the lightsaber, the holy lightsaber, essentially, of God. And
the holy lightsaber of Antioch.
Yeah, exactly. And Dresden, from previous encounters with it, knows like, well, this fucking thing can't hurt me because I'm immortal. So whatever, I'm gonna just walk through Butters, and goes to like move Butters out of the way, and the sword actually penetrates his hand and like wounds him, severely wounds Dresden in that moment.
Yeah, did we talk about the sword, the changing of the sword from Peace Talks? Because they go into it a little bit with Michael and Sonya at the Carpenter house when Harry goes to get his personal guidance from Michael. And they just happen to be training. So a little bit backstory: the sword was a sword and then was broken. And then when Butters picked it up, because Butters is a nerd, it followed the lightsaber trend and became a glowing sword of light. And they learned that the sword will pass through innocence, pass through people, but will act like a sword when it comes to interactions with the truly evil or the misguided, or as defense, as a practical sword would. So Harry assumes he's in the right and that the sword's not going to hurt him, and that's what causes him to burn, and that's what ends the fight.
And John, the fight ends and just Harry's broken. He's literally just sobbing, and just Sasha is there as well, and him and Sasha get into a fight before getting stabbed with the sword, which is an epic fight, and not even an epic fight. I take that back. It was just a sad fight. It was just a sad fight.
That's all it was.
Yeah, and Sasha is there with Dresden, just watching Dresden at his worst moment, just like snot running out of nose, just hard crying as Butters picks up Rudolph before Harry actually does kill him.
And it's Murphy gets her funeral. Mab gives her that, and there's something that we learn later on, but that's at the end of the book when the dust is settled. But we learned that Mab is very afraid of the consequences here.
Yeah.
We also, we learned from her that she wants Harry to kill Molly if Mab falls.
Yeah.
Because Molly, as the Winter Lady, would take her place as the Winter Queen if Mab fell. And we dealt with Maeve, the previous Winter Lady, in novels far back, and she was a handful. She was a murderous handful. And the mantle of the Winter Lady is a dangerous thing, and that's something that Harry is worried about for Molly, since they got sucked into this winter hole.
But John, we kind of glossed over one of the defining moments of this
Yes.
book, honestly. And you mentioned that Harry tells Mom to give a fitting burial and a fitting thing for Murphy, like a Viking warrior's kind of burial, in a sense, right? And at this point, Mom and Harry talk about why Mob actually selected Harry for this to become the Winter Knight. It wasn't because he's skilled as in his craft or anything like that. It's because she knew that he could handle the pain and not use the mantle to deaden the pain, but to actually use it to amplify it and make it to channel it to save others, essentially. Make the sacrifice on a personal basis, because every time you touch on this power, it steals a little bit of you. To take this power to try to do good in so many ways.
Yeah, and it's an interesting thing to come from Mab, because Mab has always come across as malevolent, possibly evil, but hard to say. In certain instances, for the most part, it's kind of just don't get in her fucking way, because she will step on you and not think twice of it as she wipes you off her shoe. But I think she gives us a little bit of a window into her soul here.
Yeah, exactly.
Whatever she was before was somebody who did want to do the right thing and wanted the people around her to be willing to make the choices as well. But I don't know if that's something she's lost or something she hasn't been able to do based off of whoever is around her at the time. I mean, like with Maeve was a different beast. She was just ruthless.
Yeah.
And maybe Mab just reacted accordingly, but I don't know.
Essentially,
that's just me.
It's what Harry soon finds out from this conversation is that, just like he has done, he took up the mantle to save others. He got kind of tricked into it, as we mentioned previously, but he took it to save others, to do better, to get more power to save those around him. And he comes to find out through this little glimpse of a soul through Mob that essentially she did the same thing many, like thousands and thousands of years ago. And the thing with this kind of power is every time you tap into it, like I previously mentioned, you lose a little bit of yourself. And if you keep having to make these hard choices and sacrifice yourself, you're not going to recognize who you are in, a year, let alone 1,000 years. So it's a power that slowly corrupts you. It's a power that slowly digs at your soul, but you choose to use it because, again, you're trying to save and make sure that no one else has to go through that same kind of pain that you're going through. And I related the fuck out of that, honestly, John. To the depths of my core, I understood that. And I love this exchange. And again, when Harry just looks at Mob in a new light after this, Mob kind of lets her icy demeanor down, and he kind of sees like a sad smile and a sad, knowing smile on her face that she gives Dresden. And their relationship from that point on just changes. Like it changes.
Yeah. And at that point, it is, I think with Harry, it's less a situation where it is, I have to be wary and try and find my way out from under this person. But now I don't think he exactly enjoys being in the position he is, but I don't think he 100% regrets it, because I think he trusts her more. He understands her more, and is willing to, one, he has no choice to be willing, but he is more personally willing to do this with her because he has that trust in her now.
Yeah, exactly. He doesn't just see her as pure malevolent. He sees her as like, okay, she's a person who is trying to do the right thing with the power given her, with the power, because absolute power corrupts absolutely. So moving on from that point, John, because we both talked eloquently about that. It's just a shit show from here on out. It's just a mad rush, a mad just battle after battle after. I mean, I felt like literally it was just 30 pages worth, if not longer, of just them trudging to get to the final battle, to get to this final outcome of this fighting this Titan.
Yeah, and something I think we glossed over a little bit is that when Harry makes this war banner, he's bringing in civilians, regular people who have no experience with magic, and these are just people who are just in a position where they have to fight to protect themselves and their city,
right?
With shotguns mostly,
yeah.
But it is. You're right, Anthony. It is just they do have a lot of good moments. There is a lot of altercations won and Fillmore defeated, but Harry feels the loss, due to the war banner, and that's something that I think ties back to that discussion with Mab. It's just losing bits of yourself.
Yeah,
and Harry's extended himself to these people, and he's always extended himself to the city. It's a city. That's what makes Spider-Man is that he's just like there to protect New York no matter what, and that's what I guess Harry, if anything, has a kindred spirit in. He's there to just protect the people he's chosen to protect.
Right.
And eventually we lead to, I guess, a sub-boss fight. Or less a sub-boss fight, more information about the sub-boss fight, because one of the lower Fae who work underneath Mab and Harry, Grimalkin, who I believe is a giant evil cat person thing.
Yeah, pretty much.
Cat like a Mulk, the Mulk. That's I think what they're called. He telepathically has a connection to Dresden and can report information. And he learns that there's a schism between Eithnu and two of her generals, King Korb and a human named Listen. And there's... Well, I wouldn't say Listen's actually a human. I think he's a Fillmore who looks like a human.
Yeah, it was something. He's got some sort of supernatural abilities, but chooses the face of a human or something like. I can't quite remember.
Yeah, I mean, it's vague, and again, due to us not really having the most full knowledge anymore. So Harry is just taking advantage of the fact of this new information. He learns that there's a schism growing, and that the Eye of Baelor can only be used for so often.
It's a pin down, essentially. Like once you use it, it has to like an RPG game or anything like that, where essentially you use a power and you have an X amount of time before you can use it again because it needs to cool down.
Exactly. So the fight continues, and the Mab sends her forces forward. Harry sends his forces forward. He fights off 4 more sorcerers due to Mab getting injured.
Yeah,
she's incapacitated.
Fight with some steel because Fulmore are trying to use their brains, and it was like a steel net or iron net or something that they did where they just shot a bunch of fucking iron down.
Or steel, something
really,
like that.
Yeah, that's the one thing that can really harm the Fae is iron.
Yeah. And Butters ends up helping, saves Mab, and the fight again continues.
But to the point where Mab like, okay, I owe you a favor.
Yeah, which is a big deal. Yeah, considering that the Fae take their bargains very, very seriously, to the point where you have to be very careful about what you do and what you say, because otherwise you might be owing something that you might not want to give up.
Yeah, exactly. But like, since he literally saved her life, she is like, I am indebted to you. At some point, you may call on any favor, etc., etc.
Yeah, and we get to our final battle, Anthony, the big one. And this is, for lack of a better description, this is the portals moment in Avengers Endgame. This is where everybody comes in, and this is it. This is the moment. This is where everybody puts it all on the line so that they can get one final shot. Odin shows up. Molly shows up.
The Wild Hunt shows up, John, like in its entirety. Santa and all.
Yeah, and that's unreal. It's just unreal. All of these, it's just like all of these big threats and entities that we've seen throughout all of these books just coming down, just like as like a barrel full of monkeys, just ready to go.
Yeah, and and honestly, John, it's crazy. Like that's the only thing. Like even Dresden himself is like, I can't even describe to you what's going down at this point. But essentially, Dresden gets shot in the abdomen with a gun, and while he's bleeding, he summons Titania, who is the queen of the summer court, and Butters holds off everybody, like single-handedly. Like Butters essentially gets possessed by an angel at that moment, and is just crazily with speed, stealth, and just so much dexterity, is literally fighting back the entire enemy army.
Yeah,
it's a goddamn cool scene, man.
He's possessed by the voice of Uriel, who is just one of the angels or archangels, just and he's doing the will of God, I guess.
Yeah, essentially.
I'm absolutely in agreement. Butters' transformation from the nerdy corner to this holy Jedi is unreal.
And we're not doing, loyal listeners at home, we're not doing it justice. Literally, Butters like Dresden's pretty much gone. He's a thought. He's a speck of dust that the Titan herself is about to smash him. And Butters just stands there. And Harry's just in awe that all like 5'0" of Butters with of course, the booming voice of Uriel, but it's just like, wow, this man is standing up against this Titan and he's telling her to get the hell out of this city.
Yeah, and I mean it works to a point. I mean, she retreats. Her reinforcements are essentially cut off and somewhat neutralized, and she has to hold off. Marconi and Molly's army is being held off by King Corb. So you have to deal. She has to deal with the Knights of the Sword. The Blackstaff Ebenezer just going full-fledged badass. The Archive, who it is it's a magical construct that stores all of this human knowledge and wisdom. She's there fighting, which it's kind of bizarre, but it's just like all of these people just doing everything they can to stop Eifnu. And Ebenezer takes some fire, to allow Eifnu to get hurt, because she's, throwing lightning at people.
Yeah,
it's Odin's staff.
It's just a fucked up scenario, man. Like everything's moving too quick. John, and the listeners at home, I am not ashamed to tell you, I kind of lost track. Like it was so hard to follow just because of so much chaos going on.
It's absolute chaos. But one thing of chaos I think we can talk about is what good old gentleman Johnny Marconi does. So he makes a charge for Eifnu and tries to stab her in the eye to get the Eye of Baelor out, and it doesn't work.
Yeah. And essentially, at that point, Marconi's dead to rights. He is done. She is about to kill this man. And then good old bodyguard of many, many, it feels like decades at this point, of Marconi, Hendrix.
The first book.
Yeah, since the first book, Hendrix takes the mortal wound, man. Like, he takes the kill.
He does his job.
Yeah, I mean, boy, and there's something to say about like how loyal a person is, right? Like, It's one thing to say, I'll take a bullet for you, but Hendrix literally takes the proverbial bullet, even though it wasn't a bullet that killed him, and just takes that, doesn't even think twice, just jumps in, takes the stabbing, takes the wound, and just, and there goes a character, even a minor character that have known since book one. Yeah,
and it gives Marconi the chance to escape, but it also leads to the murder of one of the White Council, Christos. Ebenezer gets a broken pelvis. The Archive is injured. And River Soldiers comes in to save the day, and probably my honestly favorite moment of the book comes from this, because River Shoulders, the Sasquatch, gets stopped, gets a dislocated shoulder, and a Native American wizard of the White Council. His name is Listens to Wind. He's able to transform into animals, Anthony. And what he does here is some kind of spectacular because he turns from an owl midair into a grizzly bear and just lands on Ithnu.
Yes. Yeah. Full on bonsai drops
Bonsai
down.
bear drop.
Yeah. Bonsai bear drop. That's a great way of putting it. And it saved River Shoulders, who was the former teacher of Listens to Wind, we should probably mention.
Yeah. Taught him his shape-shifting. But the as wonderful as the bonsai bear drop is, it leads to a broken back.
Yeah, essentially.
Listens to Wind.
Yeah, it's essentially the Bane to Batman moment where she just snaps his back. And he's just, at that point, he's just out of commission. Like, that's it. You can't do anything with broken back.
Yeah, and this is the point where Harry brings out his big gun. And he had taken something from Demon Reach and the Hades Vault, where Demon Reach holds all of these magical artifacts. And apparently he had done something to his staff to hold this thing. It is a dagger, Anthony. And he recreates the Spear of Destiny, the spear that pierced the side of Christ.
Yeah.
And he and the Knights of the Cross challenge Ithnu.
And they hold their own, man. Like, Butters almost instantaneously, I think, just gets knocked to the side because he doesn't have the fighting experience, right? So he didn't see something coming.
Yeah, well, Harry describes it as Butters learning how to fight with a sword from movies, and that's not necessarily how fights tend to go. So Butters thinking, oh, this will be like a Jedi lightsaber fight, is doing all this weird spinny shit, and then he gets decked.
Yeah. So he's out, and then it's literally down to Sonya. Sonya actually manages to get a cut in, which is amazing in itself, but just instantaneously disarms him, man.
Yeah, and the reason we need that cut is that Harry needs her blood for the spell, for the binding to put her into Demon Reach.
Exactly.
So while they're able to cut her, she's able to then cauterize it and destroy the blood that is available, so that it is now again impossible to do it until they cut her again, which is already difficult enough. I mean, we saw how much she did to so many people before they even got that. Now they have to do it again. Yeah. With less.
Exactly. And it again, with all these people down, this Titan, Ithnu, essentially is about ready to use the eye on Dresden, when Odin, out of nowhere, man, from the top rope, awakens. His spear betrays her, and it plunges into the eye of Baelor, and it pops out, essentially. And then, of course, Laura Wraith, out of nowhere, kicks her in the back of the head, really loosens the eye, flings from the Titan's skull, and gentleman Johnny Marcone recovers it and starts running towards Lake Michigan.
This little bitch.
Yes. And
so
it's, oh God.
So while Johnny's running, Dresden and Ithnu go into pursuit, and Ithnu, the blast blew back on her when Odin did his trick with his spear, because she had stolen his spear. And so she's like missing like her left arm. She's fucked up. And, she goes after him, after Marconi, and snaps his fucking neck.
Yes.
Tosses him like a rag doll. And then he gets better?
Yeah. And John, how did that happen?
This of all things, I should have seen coming. But goddamn it, this son of a bitch had me going. So we mentioned before, there is the Order of the Thorned Denarius. I believe I'm butchering the name, but there is this group that is in opposition to the Knights of the Cross, the Order of the Blackened Denarius. I was close. The Denarius are 30 pieces of silver, Anthony. The same 30 pieces of silver that Judas Iscariot obtained to betray Jesus Christ. And these pieces of coin have evil spirits in them, Anthony. Yep. And Marconi is now inhabited by the spirit of a fallen angel named Namshiel.
Oh, this sounds like it could be a possible plot moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, because let's give John Marconi, who has built himself up into this amateur gangster wizard who is trying to control all of Chicago, both in the human world and the magical realm. Let's give him a demon that teaches him evil magic.
Yep.
That's going to be a fucking great thing going forward. I was just like, because Anthony, you will agree, these Denarius fuckers are some real fuckers.
Yeah. And there's
real
for
fuckers.
what is it? There's 30 of them essentially. So for every one of them, for every 10 of those fuckers, there's only one Knight of the Holy Cross because there's only 3 of them.
Yeah.
So it's fucked. So I am very interested to see. That's going to be for maybe like a final thought segment, but I'm very interested to see how Butcher's going to take that. But John, one of the funniest and best moments comes next, where Bob comes back into play, John.
Because Harry's trying to get the binding going because now he needs to, get the blood. What is it? How does Bob and Harry's conversation go, Anthony?
Well, essentially, Dresden shows Bob the blood of the Titan, and Bob essentially says, "Oh, fuck that."
I'm going to Utah.
Yeah. And Harry's like, "Yep, Bob, we're going to bind a Titan." And it reminded me so much of their conversations throughout these books, man. Like, he's like, "Come on, wake up, Bob, time to go to work." And Bob's like, "Dude, we're not building a fucking, like, a love potion. We're binding a Titan, man. Like, this is some shit."
It's like, and all Bob wants to do is just go find a corner and jerk off to something. Because that's Bob.
And so he uses Bob as the circle, like the magic circle, to help bind Ethnu.
Yeah, and Ethnu is
whatever.
I don't know. Honestly, I think we're neither of us really know. So
I need James Marsters to read it to me. That's what I need.
Yeah, honestly, that's what it is. So Ethnu's fighting with Namshiel / Marconi, and Harry's using the opportunity to put her into the circle, a binding circle, and she decides to, tell him, "I murdered all your friends and family," and shows him a vision of the Carpenters being murdered by her forces, by her General Liston's forces, Maggie being murdered. And Harry almost buys it, except for one thing. There's no mouse.
Yep.
Now,
and by that, John, he knows, and for those of the uninitiated, Mouse is the monk dog that is Harry's best friend and loyal protector, and is got some mystical shit going on with him too.
Yeah, there's no way to easily take down that dog. He is pure magic, and he defends Maggie no matter what. And there is no way that he would have just gone down like that. So he knows Ethnu is just fucking with him.
And John, I love once he figures it out and he gets his will back and is pitting his will against the Titan, essentially. The quote he gives her, just bound, thrice said and done. Like, I was like, holy shit. Like, I'm getting goosebumps thinking about that scene again.
I mean, it's his Gandalf moment.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like, holy shit, man. And he does it. He consigns her to the island, and just Alfred, the loyal butler of Demon Reach, drags her ass to the chamber, man.
Yeah, but Harry gets dragged into it, and Marconi creates a concrete box for the two of them in water to weather the tidal wave, which Harry tends to just like, that's a dumb move. Why'd you do that, you dummy? You dumb person. Exactly. With your dumb magic. Why would you do concrete in water?
Yeah.
But to Marconi's credit, he just gives Harry the eye, because it just rolls to shore, the Eye of Baelor. And the Fulmor are routed. King Corb is sent back to the lake. Outside of the others are destroyed. And we get to our aftermath, Anthony. The battle is done. Murphy gets her proper burial. We learn that she is taken to Valhalla.
Yeah. And the way we find this out is because Dresden gets one of the messengers from Odin, essentially, if I remember correctly. And essentially, he starts threatening the fuck out of this messenger and says, like, look, tell Odin, if he does not give her a proper burial, if he does even harms one hair on her beautiful head, I will hunt him down and I will murder him in vicious blood.
Yeah.
And the messenger just looks at him and kind of like in an awe moment says, like, well, I'll tell him that, but he's going to do it regardless. He was going to, she earned her right to be in Valhalla regardless of you wanting it or not.
Yeah. But Anthony, we bypassed something that's kind of lingered in some things. Laura Wraith had showed up to Harry before that and called in one of her favors. She wants Harry to take Justine, Thomas's fiance, wife, baby mama, to see Thomas on Demon Reach. And he takes her to the docks. They are traveling by boat, or by unicorn, I should say.
To the boat, yeah.
Yeah. And we learned something about Justine, Anthony. Now,
Yeah.
this was some shit. We learned that Justine is now infected by an entity called Nemesis, which is an alias for a thing called He Who Walks Beside, an adversary. I guess you can call him Satan. He's been influencing events from this series from the jump. He was first mentioned in the novel Cold Days and has kind of been poking his head here and there. And it has something to do with Harry being a Starborn. And we know that Nemesis, I'm just going to call it Nemesis because it's easier.
Right.
It forced Thomas to do what he did, which was assassinate the king of the Svartalfs. And that's what Thomas meant by it was Justine. He was telling Harry, she made me do this. But, he was not in the best of states to tell Harry fully. So the Nemesis is essentially holding Justine hostage. And that's why Thomas did what he did. Either you do what I tell you to do, or I kill the woman you love and your child, your unborn child. And the reason that it wanted to go to Demon Reach is that it wants to unleash hell itself, open up the gates, stop Demon Reach from holding in the evil that it holds and wreak havoc upon the world. And Harry says, yeah, fuck that. And is able to at least use Demon Reach to stop Nemesis, but is, knocked into the water and then rescued by Demon Reach, which then we get, that moment with Murphy's departure to Valhalla and Harry's threat.
Yeah, I jumped the gun, but that was just from all this aftermath. That scene itself is just, it's great.
Yeah, that Murphy scene, you mean?
Yeah, the Murphy scene, exactly.
Yeah, and I kind of wish that, in talking about it, that probably could have came first, and then, they talked, then he gets encountered with Laura and, and has to deal with, this Nemesis now, which, again, like Dracul in the Black Court, it is something that we are going to have to deal with later, because right now it's just been enough destruction and death. Harry, puts together a coffin of the fallen to put in his own grave that's in Graceland that he used before. We learned that 60,000 people died and 100,000 people in Chicago were made into refugees. There's just so much death and destruction. It's mind-numbing, but I mean the honor Harry gives these people, even if they're not really there, they defended Chicago. That's what's on the headstone. They defended Chicago. They defended their home.
Not only that, John, he personally gives his own kind of like calling card to each member, surviving family member or whatever, and puts a little bit of will in each one of these and promises. And again, makes this promise 3 times to every single person, which means he's bound to it.
Mm-hmm.
And promises that whenever no questions asked, we will be there for you. I think he implies he will be there, but essentially the Winter Court and all those beings will be there for him. And I found it to be a noble thing to do, but also one of those things like, oh, Harry, you dumb fuck, because that could have so many bad implications further down the road.
But it's just Harry. That's there's going to be bad implications possibly, but he owes these people, and he was responsible for these people. To do anything less than to unanimously help them whenever they ask, that's just the job.
Yeah. And that's again, it shows his character and how much he cares for the city and the people inhabited in there. But again, I was reading this and going, oh God, I hope that doesn't go sideways.
Speaking of things going sideways, Harry, following a Michael Carpenter, the old sage that he is.
Oh man.
Is there with Harry at this funeral for the fallen. And Harry goes on about forming some kind of organization of his own, taking a book out of Marconi's book, if you will.
Yeah.
But they're interrupted by Carlos Ramirez. And Anthony, looks like Harry's out of the White Council.
Oh, God. Again, if people just took 5 fucking minutes, John.
Yeah, and a lot of the implication is that, according to Ramirez, is that they took the vote while Listens to Wind and Ebenezer were in surgery for their injuries, because Ebenezer got seriously injured by Ithnu. Listens to Wind got his back broken. And we've already mentioned, last time in our Peace Talks episode, there's a Black Council. So there's some kind of machinations going on that we don't really know the full story about, but we know somebody's trying to do some scheming.
Yes.
But Harry's back to square one now. He is, under the laws of magic, according to the White Council. If he steps out of line, McCoy's going to come and kill him. And if McCoy refuses to kill him, McCoy's going to get killed.
Yeah.
And Harry, puts a little bite back.
Yeah, he's like, look, motherfucker, look at all this shit I accomplished. And again, essentially, it's Harry throwing his big dick down. He's saying, look, you could do that, and then you'll have the entire White Court of Fae to come at you. Oh, and yeah, by the way, that Titan I bound? Yeah, I can kind of call on her at any time and purpose and send her in to do any of my bidding, such as other, former guards of Demon Reach have done in the past. I can do that.
Yeah. So, and at that point, we can bring up something we talked about later. I don't really see Harry and Carlos even finding a way back, because Harry has to deal with that weight of power now. And with the weight of power comes fear of power,
Yeah.
And Carlos has been through so much in this book alone. He lost all of his friends. 2 of his friends are going to be horribly tortured and turned into monsters. Unequivocally, they're going to get turned into monsters. And, to have Harry do what he did, I get Carlos's stance. To have to deal with Harry and what he's doing, it would be frustrating, and it would be a betrayal in some ways, because it's just like, you're not talking to me. I thought we would be able to talk to each other.
Right.
So it's just like, it's exhausting.
Yeah.
What it is, because it's just like, at the end of the day, we've said it multiple times. If they just talked out the full breadth of what each one of them are dealing with, the situation might be a little bit different. But we don't know. We honestly don't know.
And from here, John, honestly, it's allotted to do. It's Dresden tries to get healthy again. Charity, Michael's wife, nurses him back to health. And there's like a meeting of the Unseelie Accords ministry, essentially, which the White Council's not invited to, because the White Council at this point is like, no, fuck it, fuck y'all. They're just being bitches. And so it's everybody else in the aftermath trying to figure out what the hell to do. And it's here that Dresden makes his way through as a representative of the White Court, like to the demise of everyone else. But Mab backs his play because again, they bonded. They have this thing now to where she trusts him, he trusts her.
Yeah.
And essentially, he's like, look, we need to help these people. I don't care that if they think it's a mass terrorist attack and they don't know it's a supernatural. We need to find a way to help these people because they literally bled alongside all of us to make sure that we survived.
Yeah, it is. We owe them in more ways than one. Sure, we're in a position where we're not going to be in that much risk because magic has a way of fucking up electronics.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
but it doesn't eliminate the debt.
Yeah,
the debt is there no matter what, and we have to honor that.
And they essentially all agree, John, on the condition that it's the Fomor, the guys that the assholes actually started this, and the ones responsible, they have to pay off the expenses. Like they're the ones that are gonna have to foot the bill.
Yeah, and that's probably not going to be a problem. But Harry's not done yet, and then he presses a personal claim of debt owed to him by Gentleman Johnny, Anthony.
Yes,
because he aided Johnny and he banished the Titan. And Johnny says, I don't know you anything. I gave you the eye. That would be compensation, right?
Yeah. And Dresden it's kind of a dick move, but it's also a brilliant move. He's like, what are you talking about? I never received the eye. I have no idea what you're talking about. Last I saw it fell into the river.
Yeah. And Johnny can't say shit because then he would be like, well, then you have it, right, John? It's like, well, I don't know. And it's essentially he's caught in a situation where he can lie and look like an ass, or he can concede and look respectful. Especially in front of all of these accorded nations, his allies, as you will. And Harry asks for the thing I was hoping he would do. He asks for Castle Marconi because that is built on top of his house. Harry gets his house back because the home that he was with at the start of peace talks, the apartment that Molly gave him, gone, destroyed, and the Svartals don't want him there anyway.
Yeah.
So he looks at Marconi. It's like, give me my house back, bitch.
Yeah. And he has to, essentially, like, he was pissed off because Dresden actually put him in a corner.
Yeah. And he clears out. And Harry and Michael start, doing their plans to get Castle Dresden up and running. Yeah.
And essentially, God, did we talk about Michael Carpenter just losing his shit and cursing on the grave?
Oh, no. Yeah,
I just remembered that, and that was a great moment. Like, you done fucked up as a Wizarding White Council when you have the most holiest of men, the purest, most saintly person ever, essentially, cursing up a storm because the White Council decided to boot Harry out of the council.
Yeah, it's just this pure moment of just like, what the fucking fuck?
Yeah. But he agrees, and essentially he agrees to help Harry rebuild the castle, like rebuild his home, rebuild everything. Because Harry's in good need of a carpenter. And more than one.
And that, that's what Michael does best. But we get to an interesting thing, which is, the favor that Laura called was not really the last favor. So we were told she was owed 3 favors by the Winter Court. We only see really 2 of them. But we learned that the 3rd favor by Laura to Mab was that they bind the White Court of vampires and the Winter Court to be bound in alliance. So Mab says that she has accepted that request, and that to solidify that alliance, Laura Wraith and Harry Dresden are to be wed immediately.
Yeah. And at first it's immediately, and Harry loses his shit. He's like, no way.
Almost loses his shit.
Fair enough.
Because Molly's there too. Let's not forget Molly.
Yes, almost loses shit. Molly sees that and kind of plays the peacekeeper between the two because it's within Mob's right to do that.
Yeah.
Because Dresden essentially is her lackey, for lack of a better term. Like, he works under the will of Mob. So, while understanding that, Molly essentially is able to give a buffer of about a year for both Laura and Dresden to kind of get acclimated and essentially do like a courting instead of just getting tossed into it. Because Molly argues that Harry just lost Murph, who is, a veteran at this point, got into the gates of Valhalla, and that, has to give a proper mourning time. And John, in lieu of that, Molly leaves, but Mob and Dresden have such a great conversation in this particular request afterwards. And it's Mob is talking to Harry essentially about, because Dresden's pissed, he just lost Murph and all of that, and Mob's like, my boy, I mean, I'm not quoting word for word, but essentially it's my boy. I have loved and lost so many people, and it's only going to be the same for you.
Yeah, it's like, and something that we haven't brought up is that wizards tend to live long lives.
Yeah,
it's a long, lonely experience. They're not immortal, but they do live quite longer than most. And at the end of the day, Harry was going to have to be burying a lot of people.
Yeah,
a lot of people that he would have preferred not to bury, because it's just the nature of who he is. He will just live while they go.
Yeah, and that's not. I mean, that's if they didn't die dramatic deaths, right? That's if even they died of old age, natural causes.
Yeah,
but let alone having all the people that he's loved, die in dramatic ways, unfortunately.
And it's another glimpse into who Mab was, or at least Mab letting in a little bit of who she was, to tell him, just to give him a little bit of, I guess, clarity that, this is the life we have is not easy, and it is going to be filled with pain. And if you think I don't know what that feels like, you are sorely mistaken.
And again, just gives a little bit more of the behind the curtain for Mob to Dresden on that. And so upon this, Dresden leaves with Molly. They go to the Carpenter household, and Molly's afraid because she's like, my parents don't know. And I'm this, this creature. I'm now part creature. I'm going to run this fae, and they're, devout Christians. How they're going to react. And like the door opens, and Michael just acts like, like nothing's happened. It's just like, oh my God, it's so great to see you. Me and your mom missed you. Blah, blah, blah. And then he just...
This gets you out of helping your mother in the kitchen.
Yeah. And essentially, like, he admits to her that, yeah, dude, we've long since known you're the new Winter Lady. Look at our allies. Duh. Like, we here to the ground. And he's like, this isn't going to get you out of the kitchen and get out of a serious talking to between you and your me, your mother, and you, but I accept you with love and just unequivocal, unconditional love and support. And that just, it breaks Molly. Like, she starts bawling, and I'm getting super emotional reading that. And it's a great finish, except for the epilogue, John, which epilogues can be used in so many different ways when it comes to storytelling. It can be used to preview a next chapter or a next series or a next something. It can just tie up a few little loose threads, few little loose ends. But John, this is probably, and I'm not being hyperbolic here, this is probably the most touching and impactful epilogue I have ever read in any sort of fashion.
Are you talking about the Christmas story?
The Christmas story, yeah.
Yeah. That I did a dumb thing. Well, not necessarily dumb. It's less an epilogue and more a short story that is included here. But I think, Anthony, you're absolutely right. It does serve more as an epilogue to all of this bloodshed.
Yeah.
I read it before I read the novel proper, thinking, oh, this is probably just some story that takes place like a little bit before. It's not going to have any weight. I'm not going to get a big spoiler, blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, it's a very impactful story because, Harry is building a bike for his daughter and is having a hard time with it. And has a nice conversation with Michael about, the things fathers do for their children. And Santa Claus shows up and gives Harry one of the kindest gifts I think anybody could give somebody after losing so much in the way he did.
Yeah. And it's kind of throughout Peace Talks and Battleground, like this particular moment's been talked about. I can't remember which book it was, but Harry talks about, and I think it was Peace Talks, where he talks about one of his favorite memories of his dad was a Christmas where they spent together. Like every Christmas, his dad would let him drink coffee, and the coffee wasn't really that great. It was essentially just like a bunch of milk and creamer.
Just watered down.
Yeah.
Just watered down stuff, but it was just something he and his father did every Christmas, and it's just the one thing that he wishes he could do again. But his father's long gone, and he's never gonna do that again.
And Santa gives him a gift of the same cup that he used to drink out of when he was younger with his father, and it's of the same coffee, the same watered down, creamer, sugar-filled coffee. And in that moment, and he's drinking it, he can hear his father speak again. He can feel all the same feelings he had when he was younger, and he just starts honestly crying. And honestly, at this part, I'm crying too, John.
Yeah, it's just this tender thing that we don't, I don't think many people give themselves that moment to kind of just feel something like that.
Yeah.
Again, and or to be even more straightforward about it, it's something that not everybody gets to have.
Exactly.
And maybe it's just the nature of, at least me as a fan and having to deal with, so many characters that are so kind of just damaged by the things that they go through. To give a character, at least, in this case, Harry, just this moment of peace after all of this death and all of this loss, both of himself and things around him and the people around him, is just, I couldn't have figured out a better way to cap off the story, to be quite honest.
And it was the perfect way to end it, John. And my final thoughts, if you will, for cross listeners, Combo Files, it's that epilogue, that short story just kind of summed up what I love about Dresden the most and these series of novels the most. It's one man who comes from a bad background, that was full of abuse from a former mentor, full of, just sadness from his mother passing and then his father passing, and takes all of that and still tries to be the best version of himself to help as many people as he can at the end of the day. Yeah, he's grumpy at times. Yeah, he can be an asshole, pig-headed, stubborn, not have a conversation for 5 minutes where he should with some of his closest allies. But at the end of the day, he does everything within his power, even goes into debt with someone as fickle as the Winter Court, just to be able to have the power to protect those he cares for, is just summed up to me in this short story of him drinking a cup of coffee, remembering where he came from.
Yeah, and to give my final thoughts, it's been so long since we've gotten new stories in this, at least novel-length stories. I mean, there was a short story collection, but it did, when we get the novels, it's just such a leap forward into what Harry has to deal with. And I'm both scared and excited to see where it goes, because I'm scared because it's just, I don't, the apple cart has just been so upset here. It's Murphy's gone and the White Council is back to hating Harry for stupid reasons. But Harry has grown so much from that first book to now, and has just lived so much. And it's just, having gone through this series, through so much in my own life, from college to law school to now where I am, and just seeing that growth in myself and seeing it in Harry as well. It's frightening to look back and see how much you've gone through, but it's also exciting to know you are capable enough to handle what comes next. Yeah. And I'm like, from a plot standpoint, I'm curious to see what happens with Dracul. I'm curious as to where Nemesis will come up again. And I'm curious about the Lara thing, because it's just, I really, really don't care for how Murphy was killed. That's just the long and the short of it. I can't, it's just, I don't think it was good. I mean, and we talked about it in the episode. This is more my frustration with it being something that is meant to just motivate Harry in some way, and it's just like, I feel like Murphy deserved better than that, Yeah. It's just, and I'm curious as to where Butcher is going to take this forced relationship with Lara and Harry, because I mean the tease of it was there in peace talks, but it was just tension. It was so and it was just disregarded as just being a thing that that of course there's gonna be sexual tension. She's a smoking hot vampire, duh. But he's committed, and it's just to see that commitment just kind of be ripped away and him forced into this situation is just frustrating to me. But I'm very curious and excited to see what is going to come out of it.
Yeah, exactly. But John, one thing that's going to come out of the end of this episode, is you concluding it off as only you can.
Of course. Ladies, gentlemen, good listeners, you have been listening to another episode of the Ludic Loungecast. I have been one of your co-hosts, John Soares, and he's getting too old for this shit. My podcast brother from another mother, Antonicus Gluius Maximus IV. Please feel free to drop us an email, and don't forget, we have the Columbo Files every Thursday, usually. So give us a listen, have fun, and as always, thanks for listening.
Fuego!
Hello, this is Arnold Schwarzenegger. You've been listening to the Ludic Loungecast, brought to you by the Ludic Lounge. Halle! One more, follow us on Twitter, at Ludic Lounge, for Antonicus, at RohoLoco44, for John, at just_John_0891, or feel free to email us at theludiclounge@gmail.com. It was nice to see you. Ah.